Good afternoon, Miss Nicole Paul.
Good afternoon, Mr. Luke Lashley.
Thank you for coming on my podcast, the Winespiration Podcast.
It's a real pleasure to be here.
So can you share a little bit about yourself and your role at the Caribbean Sign Language Center?
Certainly, I can. Well, I am Nicole Paul. I derive a lot of pleasure from my primary job as I'm an educator. I teach deaf children. I also enjoy my other role, that of the executive director at Caribbean Sign Language Center. Why is that important to me? It's important to me because I see it as part of my life's mission, a big part of it, to ensure that we bridge the communication gap between the deaf and the hearing. And I really think that we have been making some strides in Trinidad and Tobago in that general direction, and it is a real privilege to be part of it.
What is the main mission of the Caribbean Sign Language Center and what inspired its creation?
The main mission of the Caribbean Sign Language Center is crystal clear. We exist because we intend that there will be no divide between the deaf and the hearing. The communication gap has got to shrink and eventually be extinguished. Deaf equality must become a reality in Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean. That is our mission. How did this come about? It came about because when somebody many years ago was a little girl, she had a really good pal who was deaf. This was her next door neighbor, and he was fun, he was fine, he was tremendously intelligent. And as time passed along, the little girl passed common entrance, it was that time, and went to her first choice quite happily. And her friend, who was a year younger than herself or so, he also did the common entrance and he passed. But he couldn't go to school because the only school that had a teacher of the deaf couldn't accommodate him. They would just fill the capacity. Nobody could leave, nobody could go to that school who was deaf because they had insufficient resources, not enough personnel, no teachers. And the little girl resolved at that time, listen, when I get older, I am going to become a teacher of the deaf. I am going to do something about this social injustice because I cannot stand to see. Cannot stand to see, well said, be the voice. Cannot stand to see this injustice because I know my friend is brilliant. I know my friend is capable. He has beaten me in draft and chicky pets, all other games requiring intelligence. And I know I'm not done. Therefore, this cannot be right. So I was sure that I wanted to do something about it. And over time, I'm thankful the Lord allowed me to become an educator of the deaf and also to start the NGO, Caribbean Sign Language Center. And we have been doing some groundbreaking work in terms of Trinidad and Tobago, in terms of the landscape between the deaf and the hearing, to make our society a more inclusive one.
That is very important. So I commend you on that.
Thank you.
And congratulations.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
That's so true. So many people are not very familiar with deaf culture. What are some common misconceptions you would like to clear up?
I would really like to address some of these. Now, people don't understand when deaf people say, I'm deaf and proud, and they have difficulties really understanding that all a deaf person cannot do is hear. In our society, I think it's less now so than before. We had, I would like to say, I would prefer to say had, right? a way
Yes,
of
okay.
seeing persons with um, disabilities as handicapped, as somehow less than, as not as capable. And in particular, when it comes down to deafness, that does not really apply.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, all a deaf person cannot do is hear. And what you find is that because of these disabling attitudes, um, deaf people, find it very challenging to get ahead the way that they should because the deaf person says, listen, I can do this job because I have the skills, I'm capable. And the hearing person goes, but I don't think so, because he's deaf. So, and they have this idea
Hmm.
that actually causes the deaf person to be handicapped.
Mm-hmm.
That, somehow because a person is deaf, they are less capable. This is not true. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Right.
Deaf is not dumb. And which is why deaf people, just on the side, hate the labels like
Hmm.
deaf and dumb or deaf and mute or
Mm-hmm.
deaf
Mm-hmm.
or hearing impaired. They wish to be simply called deaf and they would be happy, or hard of hearing if they're
Mm-hmm.
hard of hearing. But the deaf and dumb and deaf and mute and so on, that those things are offensive to the
Yes.
deaf community. But
Mm-hmm.
back to your really, really lovely question. So that's the first one I'd like to talk about, that people have, the idea that somehow a deaf person is, so seriously handicapped. No, learn sign language and you'd find that, we all can give deaf people an equal opportunity to shine and they will shine. So that's
Mm-hmm.
number one. Another misconception I think people have is that, well, listen, they're deaf, but they could read lips, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I want people to understand. I had to do this when I was doing my training, in order to become a sign language interpreter, in order
Right.
to work with deaf students.
Mm-hmm.
I was asked to go home, watch the news. Now, remember, we are familiar with hearing English all the time or hearing the Creole all the time, right? But a deaf person who is deaf from birth has heard none of the English. Yet still we expect them to read lips. I challenge you, Luke.
Mm-hmm.
Take your television and turn off the volume and
Mm-hmm.
watch the news reader at work, the anchor at work, reading the news. And
Mm-hmm.
you tell me how much of the news that you, who have heard English all your life, understand,
Mm-hmm.
and see if you follow it that easily. People have this idea that lip reading is wow, we deaf people do this so easily and they understand everything, and
Yes.
no, not
Hmm.
so. Sign
True.
language is important to bridge the communication gap, because what I cannot hear, if you make it plain with the visual language, that is sign language, I would understand. So that's why, we plug so hard for this.
Mm-hmm.
And a third misconception that I would like to talk about, people have the idea that sign language is universal. It's
Hmm.
not. Trinidad and Tobago has its own sign language, which is called Trinidad and
Mm-hmm.
Tobago Sign Language.
Right.
Then we also have sign language in Jamaica, Jamaican Sign Language, America, American Sign Language, Britain, British Sign Language. Every geographical domain country has their own sign language.
And that is something
So,
I never knew.
wow,
Wow.
that's why we're
Yeah.
here.
So
No
education is very
matter how
important, and
tired I
awareness.
am, I
Awareness is
can
very
always talk
important.
about sign
Mm-hmm.
languages and deaf people and deaf culture, and try to help. So I'm glad to hear you say that. Look, I've
Yes.
helped somebody. That's
Mm-hmm.
a good thing.
Yes. Yes. So awareness and education is very important for their concern.
Indeed.
Mhm. Why is it so important for the wider community to learn conversational sign language, even at a basic level?
Now, Luke, I really love that question, right? Because
Mhm.
consider, you know, the good book, the Bible says, do unto others as you would do unto you. Do
Yes.
you know that communication, language is one of the most basic of human rights? And in fact, The theme for this year's sign language
Mm-hmm.
awareness, deaf awareness week, International Week of the Deaf. The theme is, in fact, no human rights without sign language rights. Now, it is so important to be human. We need to have language. We need to be able to communicate with each other. We need to feel included. We need to know that we belong.
Mm-hmm.
Deaf people have told me, listen, you see, I am in my family and everybody's hearing and I'm the only one
Mm.
deaf. And they would crack a joke and everybody would laugh. And I would ask, what's the joke? What's the joke? And they would be like, oh gosh, we could tell you later. You wouldn't get it, or after they always left out. After, whatever it is, they try to get the information, but they really left out. And then, many times too, you would find that it has something to do with the dignity of man and the knowledge that, yes, I'm part of this community. We all speak the same language. Deaf people said, my God, we just have to hang with deaf people because the hearing people don't use sign language and we
Mm.
just don't feel involved. It is basic to your life that you share a language. If people learn sign language, the process of including deaf people, the kind of challenges and hurdles that they face in
Yes.
terms of being able to access basic information, basic human rights that we take so for granted. For example, Luke, if you had a young son or daughter who's deaf and they're preparing to do the SEA, you know that a lot of parents engage tutors and teachers to give them extra lessons, or they're going to write CSEC or something. They send them to various places, or now they have reached university level, they go and they do whatever courses they want to do to become what they want to become.
Yes.
You know how
Yes.
challenging it is for that person to do that,
Mm.
boy? They cannot find a tutor who knows sign language fluently so that they're able to advance like their hearing
Mm.
peers could advance in the
Mm-hmm.
world and take their place because of this barrier. It is
Mm.
important. Inclusion begins when we teach others to sign so that
Yes.
deaf people can be included. Because if you were deaf, wouldn't you want that for you
Mm-hmm.
to be included? Think about
Of
it.
course. Yes.
It's very important.
So, what are some of the biggest challenges that the deaf community face in the Caribbean?
I think it is so, so, so important to understand that I think one of the greatest challenges is accessibility.
Mm.
So often, deaf people are left out of critical information, and sometimes it can really make the difference between life and death. Okay, let's say, for example, the Prime Minister is going to make a speech and she's talking about, listen, we have got to do this and this and this as a nation, and because of this critical change that happened, and the Venezuelan president is really upset because of the blowing up of his boat. So we have to prepare for, well, let's say that's going on. And
Yes.
there are people none the wiser because um, at the prime minister's presentation, no sign language interpreter.
Mm.
Now, thankfully, in Trinidad and Tobago, pioneered by Caribbean Sign Language Center, we have had sign language news now on television.
Mm-hmm.
All
Mm-hmm.
right, that was a Caribbean Sign Language. We're the first to make
Mm-hmm.
that, to bring that to our television screens. We're happy to say, and not that we're proud, but we're really happy that we managed to be
Mm-hmm.
there to help make that happen. And we tip our hat to Kwishiba Lafleur, who
Yeah.
helped to make that happen as well a week here. Anyway, the point being that, deaf people need to be able to have equal access to information when it happens, as it happens, just like hearing people. That
Mm-hmm.
is human right there. And then that brings us to the other issue. You want to have accessibility Accessibility is made possible because you have qualified sign language interpreters, experienced, skilled sign language interpreters. Do we really have those sign language interpreters? We have some, but we need many more. In
Right.
fact, in many Caribbean islands, countries, uh, you just don't have sign language interpreters of the caliber needed to move the deaf community forward, to give them the
Mhm.
information they need when they need it. That is a big challenge for the deaf community. And then I would say, I alluded to it earlier, deaf people find it really difficult to get employment, proper employment, not underemployment, not exploitative employment, but
Mhm.
to find employment, meaningful jobs. In fact, the precursor to that is the fact that they are unable to get the quality education that they need
Mm.
because of the dearth of provision for them in terms of access with sign language interpreters
Mhm.
at various institutions of learning. So
Yes.
these are all very tough challenges for the deaf community, but they are by no means insurmountable. What we need is will, drive, vision, determination to make it
Mhm.
happen, and it surely will happen.
Mhm.
We can overcome all those challenges, but we would definitely have to make it a priority and work at it together.
And I agree. I agree. So, how can schools, businesses, and organizations better support and include deaf individuals in daily life?
Well, first, by providing access,
Mm.
really critical. Schools can integrate sign language into their curriculum. You know how happy I would feel if I knew, well, if I had a child and they were going to primary school. And the same way that students can now learn Spanish and learn about caro and agua, that they would learn sign language.
Mm.
You know, that would be wonderful because it would mean that their deaf friends, when they come to school, would be welcome, would have friends, would be able to speak with. So, by providing access, that is really, really, really important. Sign language on the curriculum, that is a pet dream of mine.
Mm.
And if schools would also ensure that interpreters are available, because you would remember when I told you, listen, what was the start of my journey? My friend couldn't go to school. There were no sign language interpreters,
Mm.
teachers, special education teachers. And to today, we still don't have enough.
Wow.
So we need to have,
And that's very
really train.
unfortunate.
It is because if you can't get the education you need, how are you going to take your place in life? What's going to happen to your future? How
Yes,
you
true.
building? How are you going to go about building the blocks towards a better life? You know what I mean?
Yes. But
Education is the key.
something just came in mind.
Tell me.
Just how they have pan as a national instrument in every schools, why not have sign language as a main subject where all students must do?
I don't know if you heard me applauding because that's just what I'm saying,
Yes, so I
Why not
agree with
have
that.
all
Yeah.
students must do it,
Mhm.
Certainly make it an option, make it available. Certainly in kindergarten, I would say preschool, early
Preschool
childhood
level,
education
yes, that'd be
center.
interesting.
I would
Mm-hmm.
make sure that, children learn to sign there. And in
Mm.
first and second year, oh yeah. And, so it starts with the very young,
And
and
then
it
they
makes
develop
a
it
major difference,
afterwards. I agree with
and
that.
develop
That's a
after
good
that,
idea.
and when we come down to businesses, right? So in schools, you want to make sure that you have sign language interpreters so that your deaf people, like I said earlier, if you want to do a course, you want to become an engineer, you want to become a doctor, get
Mm.
interpreters in the school system, in the universities to help you every step of the way to make sure that you reach where you're supposed to reach. And in
Mm.
fact, that they begin from basically from birth to ensure that your
Yes.
training begins so that, okay, you're deaf. That doesn't mean you can't access language and learn what you're supposed to learn. It means that people have to be focused from early.
Mm.
right? But let's deal with businesses now.
Yes.
Businesses can have sign language training for their staff, right? So
Mm.
that deaf people are customers too. When you come, you'll be able to conduct business. Many
Yeah.
times
And
deaf
communicate
people,
better.
exactly,
Mm.
deaf people want to go to government offices to conduct business, go to various private places to conduct business, and this is barrier after barrier, plenty headache.
Mm.
So if you would provide basic sign language training for your staff as
Mm-hmm.
a business owner, as a leader in government,
Mm-hmm.
that would make a major difference to the lives of deaf people.
Mm.
Inclusion wouldn't just be a buzzword, it would become a little bit more real.
Yes.
And I would say finally that more than anything else, inclusion begins with attitudes.
Mm.
And I know we alluded to it before, that if we would get rid of the disabling attitudes and replace them with enabling ones, understanding that deaf people can do anything, really, except hear, and
Yes.
understanding that deaf people are equal to us. The hearing people understand that there's no reason for deaf people to be left behind because with sign
Mm-hmm.
language, everyone is included. When we could get the attitude change, when we no longer have people doing cruel things like, pointing to deaf people, signing and kind of mocking them and saying cruel things, calling
Mm-hmm.
them names and things. When that kind of thing goes, when the attitude and green attitude that somehow that people can't do what hearing people could do is dismissed, we will really be getting somewhere.
Yes.
So that's what I would point out as, things that we can do. Change the
Mm.
attitude, learn sign language, train your staff in sign language, provide access, let schools in particular be equipped with sign language interpreters, special
Mm-hmm.
educators who know sign language. We'll be getting somewhere.
I would agree.
Thank you.
Right. So tell us about your collaboration with LLW Holdings Limited for Sip and Sign. What can participants expect from this event?
Wow, that's a lovely, lovely question from Mr. Luke Lashley, who is the founder, owner, LLW. I think it's going to be a major event. I think it's going to become a major event on the social calendar because you can expect, first of all, lots of fun and lots of learning. Okay, we're talking about in a totally different atmosphere, in a totally different environment of congeniality, of mingling, fun, a relaxed kind of atmosphere with fine, exquisite wines not found anywhere else,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Oh, yes.
With really interesting names like Mango Joe Breaker, Sweet Potato Wine. You would be really, experiencing something different in
Yes.
that kind of environment with like-minded peers, lovely people. You're going to be learning how to sign, something that before done before. Some would have done a bit of sign language before,
Mm-hmm.
and we laugh, we mix, we mingle, we try it, we have fun, we play games, and besides that, there would be certain, shall we say, incentives. Besides the delicious wine, we will be having a hamper giveaway to a lucky person, courtesy, fashioned by Faith. That would be a killer Philip. We would also have on display beautiful designs by one Mr. Luke Lashley himself, as well as by deaf persons, display of craft items, really exquisite stuff, um, fashions again. And we would also be serving you the most delicious food, finger foods. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. It's going to be learning. You would be taught, you would be meeting deaf people there, and we would be learning sign language. When you leave, you would be able to do basic conversation with any deaf person anywhere in Trinidad and Tobago and beyond in the Caribbean. And you would be able to say, what kind of wine you like. So it's going to
Yes.
be fun. It's going to be
Mm.
pleasant. It's going to be at La Jolla on Sunday, the 28th of September, which is the last day of Deaf, International Week of the Deaf. And we're inviting you to come on down. It's going to be lovely. What do you say, Mr. Lashley? Anything to add?
Yeah, well, I would agree. You know, also this is a great initiative for persons who have an interest to do sign language, but they haven't gotten the time or the opportunity to do so.
I love the way you put
We'll be able
that.
to have the opportunity on that day and then
That's
have
very
do
true.
networking as well to be in contact with the organization, and persons could not be able to focus or develop their skill and learn more about a language,
Well
so they
said.
can be
Well
able
said.
to adapt with their friends or colleagues, and communicate on a wider scale as well with the persons who are deaf, in the deaf community. So
Exactly.
it is a
Wow.
great initiative.
Yeah, I really, really like it. I'm looking
Mm.
forward to it. This is the first. You ever heard the expression "the first to the finest"?
Yes,
This is the
first.
first time. This is happening in Trinidad and Tobago, and we just so looking forward to it. You have your wine, you have the signs, you have the company, and you give it your best shot. You know,
Yes.
yeah, it's going to be enjoyable. Mhm.
I think you may touch this next question. You may have touched on one or two in between already. All right, but I'll still ask it anyway. How do you think events like Sip and Sign help break barriers and bring more inclusion in society?
Mm. I think events like Sip and Sign, yeah, they're different and they are powerful. Why I say that?
Mm.
I say that because, okay, you're sent to school to learn and it's a more rigid type of environment. You have
Mm.
to do certain things and it's, about work. Sip and Sign is more about fun. It's more about relaxation. It's more
Mhm.
about learning in fun way. It is powerful because adults needed to have space and time in which they are just blessed to socialize and let off the pressure and to get with other adults and what is theirs. Curiosity. Hey, I'm learning a new thing. Let me try this. Laughter. Oh gosh, I'm looking so kicksy when I do the sign, but I'm doing it anyway. Don't laugh at me.
Yes.
And it's about connection because
Mm.
remember, it's about learning how to communicate with a
Mm.
whole sector in society that tends to be kind of like, almost invisible. In fact, this is called the invisible disability, because
Mm.
you don't know a person is deaf until they sign. Then you could say, now I know.
Yes.
But it's about discovery. It's about fun. It is different and it is something that we believe that's going to bring more inclusion into society. I feel, when people take the step to come to Slip and Sign, I believe that these people are special people, those who come. And furthermore, when they leave, we would have taken another step towards having a more compassionate and
Yes.
inclusive society. That's how I really feel about it.
Okay. So what are some of the long-term goals of the Caribbean Sign Language Center, and how can the public get involved?
That is a really wonderful question. The long-term goals of the Caribbean Sign Language Center all center around making inclusion more of a reality.
Mm.
We live for the day when deaf people can have access to the same services in real time with no communication hiccups
Mhm.
and hindrances, just like hearing people can. When a deaf person can walk into any government agency and there is your sign language interpreter, signing away, or better yet, they say hi and the person behind the desk signs back hi. They ask
Yes.
for, I need XYZ, and the person who's assisting them says, absolutely no problem. So, ma'am, would you please fill out this form, sign this?
Mhm.
Do you want this? You know, in other
Mhm.
words, seamless
Yes.
communication in
Mm.
sign language. We live for that day. We also live for the day when people in Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean understand
Mhm.
that the biggest handicap is not that the person is deaf, but in fact, our attitudes. We are looking for attitudinal change in our society to see our society become an inclusive place where when we say every creed and race find an
Mm.
equal place,
Oh,
we
yes.
understand that deaf people have an equal place here too,
True.
and they're
Mm.
able. If my deaf son or daughter wants to become an astronaut, they must be able to be equipped with the education that
Mhm.
would lead them in that direction to eventually achieving their dream, just like any hearing child would dream. Deaf children should be able to dream too and
As well.
achieve their
Yes.
dreams too.
I
It must
agree.
not be such a great obstacle course because I'm deaf. It must
Mhm.
be that even though I am deaf, my pathway is made much easier
Mm.
because in my society, people have prepared various methods to make my education more accessible, to make also my getting of proper employment more accessible because people's attitudes have changed. That's the kind of goals that CSLC, Caribbean Sign Language Center, works towards.
Yes. All right. So this is the last question. Last but not least, on a personal note, what does it mean to you when someone takes the time to learn and communicate in sign language?
Luke, people always say that I have a certain kind of joy that
Mhm.
they can feel
Mhm.
when I am talking about sign language, and in particular when I'm teaching people to sign. And that is real. When people take the time and trouble to say, yes, I want to communicate with deaf people. I
Yes.
want to learn sign language. I understand that all a deaf person cannot do is hear. I understand that by learning sign language, I am making the society more inclusive. Or I love how sign language looks. I want to use it in worship. I want to use it to spread the news that, deaf people are people too. They are our brothers and sisters. Whatever it is, it's about being more inclusive. And me
Yes.
personally, it makes me light up. It really makes me happy from the inside out when people learn to sign. And that is why Sip and Sign on Sunday the 28th, I know it is going to be something special because it's going to be a whole group of people who say, hey, we really want to take this step. We want to have fun while learning this important skill. We want and we understand that it's about creating a better Trinidad and Tobago. And you know what? I feel that we'll have a whole lot of sparks lighting up there. A whole lot of
Yes.
people doing something really good for a worthy
Mhm.
cause to help the deaf community.
I agree. All right. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you very much for joining me on this podcast to share, the insight of your organization and what persons are to expect at the SIP and sign event. that should be taking place on the 28th of September. Could you tell us where could person find you or your organization on social media?
Sure. It would be lovely if you would simply go to www.cslctt.org, and that's where you'll find us. You'll also find us on Facebook. We are on Instagram, Caribbean Sign Language Center, and we are also reachable by phone. Just call 640 CSLC and you will get us. You can also reach us how again? We are everywhere and easily reachable. Social media, by phone, just give us a call and we will be happy. If anybody wants, you have a church group within your church and you want to learn sign language, or let's say you are at a school and you would like your pupils to learn to sign, or you are part of a government organization and you would like to have quality sign language that includes deaf persons as tutors, because we also pioneered in that area, you can just give us a call and we will be willing to come and meet you wherever you are and teach you to sign and teach you to sign well. That's very important so that when we're through, yes, you can communicate with deaf people everywhere. So
I
thank
like
you so
that.
much, Luke.
Most welcome. Most welcome. All right.
Yes,
So have a blessed evening, and I will be hearing and seeing from you very soon.
indeed you will. It's
Okay
been a
then.
privilege being here and to speak with your
Most welcome.
audience. And we
Mhm.
want to tell everyone when you want great tasting wine, alcoholic as well as non-alcoholic, go to the man, Duke
Yes.
Lashley of LLW.
Yes.
Okay,
And I also have
authentic.
a next wine coming out launching as well. It'll be launching on the day, on the 28th. It is called LLW Pink Bliss.
Oh my, it sounds good already, especially my favorite color is pink.
Lovely. And it's a nice pink wine too.
Alrighty, that sounds wonderful. So
Yeah.
thank you so very, very much. We appreciate being here. We really enjoy collaborating with you, Luke, and we wish you all the best.
My pleasure.
And for our sip and sign on the 20th, we pray
Yes.
that God will bless. So
All right.
bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.